Welcome, 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 everyone. It is your girl, Marcy Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective and the BGC Book Club. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you again for another episode that I'm sure is going to delight you because we'll be talking about scandal. And we know how much we love things that are scandalous. So for those of you who haven't joined us in the past, as I mentioned, I'm Marcy Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective, which has been around for 4 years now. 14 years. And it's a wonderful space where I believe in celebrating Black women and the wonderful stories that we have to share. BGC Book Club is a very special place where we get to do this once a week. And as I said, I'm very excited for tonight's guest. So tonight we are going to be talking about The Art of Scandal by Regina Black. So let me give you a little introduction into who she is, and then we'll get into the story and the book itself. So Regina Black is a former civil litigator, current law school administrator, and lifelong romance reader who has always been passionate about the depiction of Black women in popular culture. She currently resides in the southeastern United States with her husband and daughter, and this is her debut novel, The Art of Scandal. So without any further delay, welcome to the space, Regina Black.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I am so happy to have you here. And as I was telling you before we came on live, I truly enjoyed having an opportunity to read The Art of Scandal. So I can't wait to really dive into it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so congratulations, because your book, baby, has only really been out not even quite a week yet.
Yeah, it's still a baby.
Yeah. So how does that feel?
It's a little surreal. Like, I mean, it's starting to sink in because more people have it and more people are talking and reaching out to me about it. But for so long, it was just a Word document on my computer.
Wow.
So yeah, it's finally starting to feel like a book. So.
Wow. Okay. And so how long did it take you from start to finish to write it? And what was it that prompted you to want to write a romance novel anyway, besides just being a lover of romance novels?
But it really is a little bit like I am a lover of romance. That when I first started writing, I just love reading in general. I love books, that sort of thing. But I think my entry point into reading was romance. So like lots of Harlequin category books when I was really young, like a teenager, I loved those books. And so when I've sat down to write my first book, it never really occurred to me to write any other type of book because those beats are just so familiar to me. For me, and this isn't the first book I've ever written. It's
Okay.
I've written like, oh goodness, like 10 or 11 books before this. This is the first book that I ever considered trying to get published.
Okay.
Like before, I was just kind of writing for me, and I had an online community as well of Black women. I did a little fan fiction writing, kind of like Nathan in the book.
Okay.
And I did original fiction writing, and I wrote like that for years. And when the pandemic happened is when I kind of went back to some old ideas I had, because it was a little bit like, if not now, when?
Right.
So I went back to some old ideas I had, and I hadn't been writing for years. I got married and started my family, and that kind of fell off. So I wanted to come back to it. And I found this kind of nugget of a brainstorm I had like 10 years ago about this woman who's has this picture perfect life on the outside, but it's falling apart behind the scenes. And I also knew that I wanted her to get involved in a relationship that kind of forced her to find herself again. And so that's how this book kind of blossomed and kind of blew into my head. And at this point, I was married and I had a child. And so it really just kind of spoke to me, which is why this ended up being the book that kind of brought me back to writing. So.
Wow, that's really
Yeah.
exciting. And I love the fact that you say you found your way back to it, because a lot of times we can get caught up in life. It can be a job, it can be a family, it can be a lot of different things that take us away from something that we're passionate about. And it's
Mhm.
wonderful were able to find your way back and give us such a compelling story. As I was telling you earlier, I really loved reading and listening to The Art of Scandal because it is available in an audio format as well. And it just, I love your style of writing. And I know that this is just the beginning of many wonderful things ahead of you. So, question. So, for those who may not have had a chance to read it yet, since it is a baby, just give us a little bit of insight into what The Art of Scandal, the story itself, is about.
The story is about Rachel. I always start out with saying it's a little bit like if Shonda Rhimes rebooted The Good Wife. Like, that's what I always say. And so it's about Rachel Abbott, and she is a 37-year-old kind of society trophy wife to this progressive white politician. They've been married for 13 years. And when the book starts, she finds out that he has been cheating on her in probably the worst way you can find that out. And she is understandably upset. She's done with the marriage. And he confesses that he had intended to leave her after his current reelection campaign, but he has eyes on the White House and he can't afford a messy split. So she uses that opportunity to kind of get around the prenup she signed, and says, I'll stay married to you and fake a happy marriage in exchange for, $1 million in the house. But what she doesn't plan on is meeting this young artist, this 26-year-old artist named Nathan Vasquez, who's also a little lost too. And they connect, but he also has some secrets of his own. He's hiding.
Yes. And it is a juicy story.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that really, just starting at the top, the fact that looking at Rachel being married to Matt Abbott, it's kind of like, to me, they felt mismatched.
Yes.
But, it's one of those things that you think that sometimes there are couples that come together for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And it's like, they come together and they stay together. This really felt like a marriage of convenience. Like there might have been love at one point in time, but, at a certain point it became a marriage of convenience.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I wanted to write to people that when you really look at them, you can tell that they probably shouldn't have gotten married, because they're very different. And, when you're young, you get into relationships that serve you when you're younger. And in my mind, this is a relationship that they both needed when they were like younger versions of themselves, but the future they wanted for themselves was completely different. But people get married for a lot of reasons, and a lot of them are not related to love. They're more related to, what do I need now? What situation am I in? And Rachel is very much in a situation where he does feel like this fairy tale prince coming in to kind of lift her from a lot of the stuff she's been dealing with. And so she just kind of makes this deal with herself that, like, in exchange for this, he's offering, safety and comfort and, all its security, all these things she's been missing. In exchange for that, she becomes the type of wife he needs to achieve his goals. And I think that's a little more common than we think in marriage. So, yeah.
I definitely believe it's so. And, it makes me think of, because it is a political situation, political family, we think of some of the families that we've seen in politics that you wonder, like,
Yeah.
I can think of something. I'm not going to name names right now. You should look at them and you wonder, like, okay, was this the thing where they came together and we figured we could have all this power if we come together as, this couple, and, maybe she's the trophy wife, or maybe she has certain skill set that, help them look better, or whatever the case may be. So, now, did you ever have any experience living in that area, in the DC area, or these are things that you researched over time?
So I have a lot of friends and connections in the DC area. So it was someplace that I visited like at least once a year, sometimes multiple times a year. So I went there a lot. And then it was a combination of that and a little bit of research. And just being kind of a plugged in citizen, and like that observational thing of looking at political married couples, particularly the ones that grapple with these types of stories, and really thinking through that question of, we always think, why did she stay? Why did she put up with this? That sort of thing. And just thinking about it in terms of the toll that public facing relationship can take on a marriage in that kind of environment. So it was a little bit of a combination of all those things. So.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking those, a lot of times your pastors' wives,
Yes.
first ladies, the other first ladies go through a lot of similar things with celebrity wives. Oftentimes will have these lives that look good on the outside, but they're really dealing with a lot of things, internally.
Yeah, it's really about like when sometimes you marry this large personality, your identity gets so entangled with them that if something happens, the idea of actually splitting from that person is like giving up a huge part of who you are and who you've become. Like I think of Meghan Markle.
Mm-hmm.
Right now she's very much, her identity is very entangled in her husband's identity and what that would look like if she suddenly was detached from that. And that's a big choice that someone would have to make. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now, of course, we also have her who turns out to be her love interest later on, Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
And he is quite a complex character as well. He is a Mexican American.
Yes.
Who pretty much is always grown up in America, gone back to visit family and things like that. And he has a very interesting story as well, because it's like there's certain things that he's trying to get away from to kind of establish his own self.
Yes. So yeah, he was an interesting character to develop because I did want to make sure he felt authentically him. I wanted to definitely represent that his identity in a thoughtful and careful way. But I also wanted to make sure, I was writing a story for him that also felt authentically 26 years old. And that's hard for me because I am not 26 years old anymore. And so, but thinking through it, I had to balance what his journey was and his arc was and make that feel like age appropriate, but also he had to be a legitimate love interest for a 37-year-old woman and believable as someone that she could see a future with. So it was really interesting to kind of balance those two things. And one of the ways I tried to do it is through, his story is very much a coming of age story, that transition from early adulthood to a later adulthood where you start to realize how much agency you actually do have over your life. And that fact that like your parents are not these mythical figures, they're just people, and that you could lose them. They're not going to be around forever. And so that was really a part of his journey. Also, the way he loves is very young, because he's never been in love. He's never really had his heart broken. And so he just dives in like, head first. And so that was very intentional on my part. Someone asked me like, think Nathan fell in love with her first. And I was, oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. He just looked at her like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. He's just blown away. And, and it was fun to write that because, Rachel has a lot of baggage. She has brings a lot of things. So she's way more cautious with the decisions that she makes. But he is not. He's just like, wow, this feels amazing. I want it all the time. Like that's how he thinks. That's pretty much where he is. So
right, which is very interesting because I guess being a more mature person and reading that, you think, well, even if you do like this person is still married. This person is still, trying to figure out what they're going to do with that. You might want to guard your heart a little bit because you don't know how things are going to play out. Because we know people get separated and get back together.
Yes.
Of course, he's young. So he's not thinking about all of that.
No.
So that's interesting. So what was it that made you want to have a 37-year-old woman and a 26-year-old man come together and have a relationship?
So They represent each other's arcs in some way, because Rachel's story is about her recapturing a part of her life when she was younger and a passion that she had buried, like her photography career and her passion for art creation and mentorship and things like that. And Nathan's arc is about him kind of coming of age and kind of transitioning into that more mature stage of his life. And it felt appropriate that they would be drawn to people who embody those journeys.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons I thought it would be really great to kind of pair these two people, because they're in that particular stage of life. And so that's that's the main reason I decided to do it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I liked it because the reality of it is, and it actually was an article or a meme or something I saw on Instagram recently where it was talking about the older woman and the younger man. And in a lot of cases, older women are choosing younger men. It's not the same stigma that it used to be. Because I mean, if you see an older man with a younger woman, that you think that's normal, that's
Yeah.
or the other way around. And a lot of the reasons why women are doing that is because, maybe that person is more open and more free and, maybe not as controlling or not as old ways, that they can find, a healthy balance of love and commitment.
Yeah. And from Rachel, I was also like, there's a lot of things in the book about Rachel that I kind of push back on a lot of the traditional expectations that we place on women all the time. Rachel struggles with the fact that there's a lot of things about her that are considered not acceptable, that sort of thing. And so her being in this relationship and falling for this younger man is just another kind of example of ways where she doesn't fit that traditional mold that she's supposed to fit. And what does the ending look like for her if it's not that traditional ending, or she's with this untraditional partner? And her being okay with that is where she needed to land at the end of the book. She's like, I am totally okay with just loving without it having this like practical purpose of, elevating me or keeping my daughter safe. It's just about who I love. And so she had to get a place where she was comfortable embracing, no, this is who I am. These are the things I love. This is what I'm passionate about. And that's okay. It's not something I have to be ashamed of.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what a blessing it is to be able to make the choice that know is best and right for you without whatever society or, outside people, your family, whoever has to say about it, but to make the choice that is best for you.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the book is called The Art of Scandal. So we have both art and scandal in the book. And some of the things we talked about thus far, you all can kind of figure out what some of the scandal part might be. But the art part, I really enjoyed seeing you talk about art in the book, and so what was that process like for you, to either learn about art or dive deeper and, just to be able to talk about that as a thing that kind of, ultimately draws these two together?
So, I love art. I'm not an artist. I mean, I am a type of artist, but I'm not a painter or anything like that. So I will say that was difficult for me to write, and it took a while to get right, and I wanted to get it right. It was really interesting. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of historical research, the history of modern art, like a lot of stuff that didn't end up in the book, but just kind of helped me get in the skin of people who lived and breathed this and loved it. And, thinking through, okay, what type of artist is Nathan? And what kind of artist is Rachel? What are their voices like? And so that was fun. And that was a lot of research, but it was also so I have this habit of writing characters that are nothing like me, that do things that I've never done or things I just find interesting. And the way I tend to do that is I kind of write in the spaces that overlap with things that I do know and that I am passionate about. So the way I wrote about their art was kind of that overlap of me being a creator, a writer, and how I come up with ideas and how I explore themes and how I think about my creative process and kind of translated that into this visual art approach. So And that worked, and it worked for me, I think, to think of it that way. So it was a combination of that and just me being a fan of artists. So, and with art with them, it really is where it's a love language between them, and it's where they see each other, because art is one of those things. It's very personal, and a lot of times it's a way we express ourselves when we can't really verbally do it, or we're not in a safe space to do it, which is something that has been common in our history in particular. A lot of times it just hasn't been safe to express ourselves in a lot of spaces, and we've done that through dance and song and music and fine art and things like that. And so here you have two people of color that both are in situations where they felt not safe to express themselves, or ashamed of their passion, like their passion is harm them in some way, or it has caused them pain, or people they love pain, and they're both kind of a little ashamed of how much they're still passionate about this thing. And then they see each other, and they see each other's art, they see each other's passion, and they tell each other, hey, this thing you're ashamed of is actually beautiful.
Yes.
And that's where I think they come together as people.
Right. And I think it's just beautiful to see that, because the reality of it is, you meet someone and there can be what should I say, a sexual attraction or
Yeah.
physical attraction, or something that's a little more superficial a lot of times.
Right. Yeah.
Then you can like dive into the heart of a person, the heart and the art.
Yeah.
Of a person, it can give you an even deeper connection,
Mm-hmm.
through that shared experience of, like you said, putting your passion on the page or on the canvas, or
Mm-hmm.
dance, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved having a chance to see that. And of course, they use different mediums to express themselves with their art. But one thing specifically about Rachel is that, excuse me, she had been a photographer and kind of gotten away from it. But she also, as a Black woman, and this is something that I think is real important in the book that I love to tap into, is her desire to, how can I put it? Her desire to really give Black women freedom in their bodies.
Yes.
And to express who they are just in their physicality and all those sorts of things, and celebrating womanism, because you do mention in the book womanism, quote unquote feminism. So just tell me what was it that made you want to include that as a part of Rachel's story? Because I find that quite powerful.
So it was a little bit of, like I said, I grew up reading a lot of romance novels, and there is always this conversation surrounding it inside that space about whether it's a feminist medium. And, it's a conversation. Like when I read those books, there's this combination of kind of liberation and the fact that you can read about women being loved and cherished and that sort of thing. But then we also bring our biases and expectations and things into that reading and into those books a lot of times. So even though there are some things that are I think are very progressive about it, some of our attitudes about what's acceptable for women to do, like attitudes that they have, can pop up in romance in that genre a lot. So with Rachel, I very intentionally created a character, I think, that kind of pushed back against some of the things that we're used to seeing, or used to, that the way we want our rootable female characters to be. So, Rachel was a single mother. She's a teenage mother. And one of the things I did not want is for her to be remotely like ashamed of that.
Right.
And, her body and her sexuality and how she embraced it, like who she was as a sexual person. I wanted to show you a woman that was a very sexual person and was very proud of being a sexual person, and how that was like once she got married to this man, it was in the public eye, she was very much pressured not to be that person. But deep down, she wasn't ever really embarrassed of the fact that she loved these things. It was just the fact that society said, no, You can't
Right.
be in this space and be those things. So I really put that aspect of her in there because it was kind of a conversation I was having about like what makes a good romance
Right.
heroine, like, and can she be an adult woman with this adult child that she had when she was a teenager, and can she be someone who loves, embraces her sexuality and that sort of thing. So um, those are some
Yeah.
of the things. Yeah.
I just found that so powerful because it is true. Because I mean, a lot of times when you think romance, you might think damsel in distress that gets rescued. You
Yeah.
know, and this isn't that. This
No. Yeah.
that. You know, there are some things where they're rescuing each other, so to speak,
Hmm.
for lack of a better
Yeah.
way of putting it. He's doing things for her, she's doing things for him, but it's not like he just swoops in like the white knight or the brown knight in this case.
Yeah. No. No.
Sweeps her off her feet and it makes everything right. You know, they are both going through things and figuring out who they want to be and how they want to show up in the world. And I just think that made it for me a lot more powerful,
Yeah.
to see that in both of the main characters.
Hmm.
And then of course we also have some others, they both have their family members and
Yes.
things like that are part of the book as well. Let's talk a little bit about Nathan's family. Of course, we see like his brother, his mother,
Mm-hmm.
his father, and there are a lot of different things going on within that family dynamic like we see in many
Mm-hmm.
families.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing all the families,
Yes.
the Vasquez family in particular, because I think, like you said at the beginning of the conversation, he is pulling away from something that has been part of his family for generations. His great grandfather was I'm sorry, his great grandmother was an immigrant, and she came here and she married someone, and they have this this family legacy of this is what we do. They're this big coffee importer business that's been in the family, and it's just there's this model of this is what the Vasquez men do. There's this strain of patriarchal strain going through it, like you're a son, therefore you're this. And when you get to Nathan there's a huge gap between Nathan and his older brother, which is significant because Nathan was not an expected child. He wasn't planned
Right.
for. And he knows this. He grows up knowing that he was an accident, and he internalizes it because his parents are in this space where they're like, wait, babies? We've moved on from babies. And so I don't want to say there was complete neglect, but there was just kind of a lack of engagement in his child rearing at the level of his older brother. And it actually kind of left him to his own devices, which probably is a big impact on why he ended up kind of rejecting that traditional expectation of going into the family business and that sort of thing. But he was always made to feel like that was somehow deficient in
Right.
some way. And then when he turned 18, his entire family usually would stay on the property. And I did that intentionally because, I wanted to, it was a nod to the culture. Just,
Right.
they have this huge property and everybody just kind of stays there. And that's what everyone does. And he turns 18 and he leaves and everyone is horrified. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you're not. And so it was a big rift that happened with their family. That's addressed in the book where they feel like he just completely gave up on them and abandoned them, and they're holding a lot of hurt, and he doesn't really understand how much pain that caused them. And so that's a big part of his story in the book is him really realizing how much pain he caused, how much control he actually does have over his life, and actually seeing clearly what his family, who his family members are, instead of the stories he's kind of told himself about them.
Right. And I mean, and that's real. So I appreciate the fact that you included that because I'm thinking, as you're saying it, I'm thinking about I don't personally know any Mexican families, but I have lived in areas where there were Mexican families,
Yeah.
and they tend to
Yeah.
stay together.
Yeah.
It'll be a multi-generational household. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not that far-fetched to see that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you included that.
Mm-hmm.
But just to understand that even in those instances, sometimes there is a lot of, how can I put it? There are those things that you carry from childhood or whatever that stick with you, that
Mm-hmm.
make you, have feelings about what your family is or isn't. But then
Mm-hmm.
also there is space where for a child to carve their own path.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of see how he's navigating that.
Mm-hmm.
Still being connected to the family and, loving his family and following, some level of traditions or whatever, but then also carving his own path. And I think that that's important.
Yeah. And I think he really, one of the big things that he learns, and he learns through loving Rachel, is just how to show compassion for people who are just kind of trying to figure it out. Like Nathan, up until that point, has never really messed up in a major way. Like he's never made one of those big kind of mistakes or loved someone in a way that ultimately was not the way that they should be loved, or thought he knew the right thing to do. And he's never experienced that, and he kind of fumbles through that with his first love. And so every mistake he makes and every painful things that happen kind of allow him to have more insight into his parents and his brother. And he looks at his brother's marriage and his relationships in a different way because he gets it a little more. And he never really understands his parents' marriage. And that's something that he learns too, like as he goes on. And the more he engages with his family, the more they understand the man that he's become, because he wasn't letting them get to know who he was. And so, yeah, it's really about, like, that family in particular is really about them healing. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and looking at Rachel, and I like her last name is Thomas, like mine. But Rachel Thomas
Yes.
Abbott, Rachel Thomas's family, she
Mhm.
also experienced a lot of different things that she had to, overcome as
Yeah.
well. Of course, I already mentioned being a teen mom, and then just
Mhm.
different relationships she had with family members or didn't have, or or loss,
Yeah.
love and loss, all of those things that she's overcoming as she's trying to figure out even who she is as a 37-year-old woman who's been stifled for a
Yeah.
very long time.
Yeah, she with the Thomas family, I did want to write. So, Black families, we tend to have a lot of non-traditional family structures. And I really wanted to depict that in the book. Like the fact that, Rachel was raised by her father, and, she's a single mom, and, Alicia is raised her children, pretty much by herself, that sort of thing, and how she raised them. And then, but I also wanted to kind of have this cult inside that family, this history of kind of creativity running through that family. So if you notice, like her father was a musician and Alicia's a writer, and then there are chefs and that sort of thing in her family. So I kind of wanted to create that kind of identity within the Thomas family. Particularly because, a lot of times when we go out to college or something like that, we tend to lean to more practical things. And so I really wanted to write these like a Black family of creatives in a way. And, with Rachel, she's very much impacted by the fact that her mother left. And she really doesn't know why. She spent her entire life like not truly knowing why her mother left. And she loved her father, and he was kind and he was caring, but like all parents, there are some things he did better than others.
Right.
And one of those things that he did not do well was withholding information from his daughter. And so he did not, explain to her the situation with her mother. He didn't tell her, he was like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And he thought he was being a good parent by doing that. And to a certain extent it is, But what it did rob her kind of is that understanding of her mother, and not kind of putting that on her as a daughter to be like, what is it about me? That my mother, it was so easy for me to leave. And then she ends up kind of recreating that situation to a certain extent with her daughter. And she's never forgiven herself for that. So it's a little bit of that kind of intergenerational trauma. Like, we carry those things down with us. And her journey really is kind of letting that go and like healing and, realizing that she really is enough, that she is a good mom. So.
Right. And that was good to see how that
Yeah.
all, how she got some answers later on to figure out what's going on. 'Cause I mean, it's something to live a life. And, that just felt really real, because I can think of people that I know, or even instances in my own family where people have questions, or maybe be holding on to something that happened before, that they heard from before, and they're trying to navigate and figure out who they want to be and how they want to show up in the world, in spite of whatever that might have happened in the past. Now, of course, this is a romance novel.
Yes.
I know we've been talking about some of the heavier themes, but this is to let people know that, it's not just, hugging and kissing and, other things. It's not just that. There is depth and story and, things to really think about and to consider. And I really like that you wrote it that way, Regina, because I always, no matter what I read, I want to be able to take something away from it where I can feel like I learned a lesson in the reading, even if it is quote unquote light or lighter fare. In some instances, I still want to feel like I learned something. But of course, there is steaminess in here.
Yes.
So, because as I told you earlier, I was listening when I got to that part, and I was like, oh my. I wasn't actually reading it. I was hearing it in my ear, and I was like, okay, all right.
No, yeah.
So for you as a writer, what was that experience like to have to craft, sex scenes? And it's not, not a lot, maybe 2 or 3, but what was it like for you to have to craft those sex scenes to put into the book?
So, I had, Rachel is a very sexual person, and I had to do her justice. Like, it's
Right.
But also it's weird because I actually think of romance in general as a very emotion driven genre, right? Like, people pick up a book like this and they want to feel those feelings. They want to feel that fast heartbeat of the tension in those scenes. And to me, when I write the love scenes, it's almost like, when people pick up like horror, which I actually think is actually the closest genre to romance. I know that's controversial, but they are two genres that are so emotion based. Like, people pick up horror to be scared and like have those visceral feelings, and romance is similar, right? You want those visceral feelings. And so when I sat down to write the love scenes in this book, I just thought about like the visceral feeling that I wanted someone reading it to feel. I didn't want to just tell you that they had this passionate connection. I wanted you to have it unfold in front of you on page. So particularly, when I write those scenes, one of the things I try to make sure to do is within the scene, you're learning more about these people within the scene. And it's really like, it's just revealing about, and they're learning things about themselves. They might have like a realization about how they feel about this person. And it's incredibly vulnerable, right? And which is why a lot of times I like to give you that scene and that vulnerable moment in that experience. And then after that, I give you something that pushes back against that vulnerability, or like complicates that vulnerability. So you're right there with the character, like, wait, this just happened and you just did this?
Yeah, what's going on?
What? And I feel like the impact of that is a little less if I just told you like, oh yeah, they kissed and then they slept together and then, the thing happens. I want you to kind of go through that emotional journey with the characters. And so when I sit down to write those scenes, that is what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of it in terms of who they are and how, where they are in this moment. So there are like two scenes in the book and they're very different tones. And so, yeah, I think through all that, to me, sex scenes are about deepening character deepening character and the understanding of the character and why these two people are compatible. So
right, and I do get that, in the story. It's just, of course, when you're sitting there or listening or reading, you're like, oh,
yeah,
what's happening here? But that is so true, because I guess for the context of people who are being intimate because they're in relationship versus people being intimate just for the sake of being intimate, there is a big difference. And so to be able to see that and how you get to that point and the tension and everything that builds, and then you have this experience, and then, like you say, you come down off of that experience, and then you're back to the real world, so to speak, and things might not be as flowery as they were in that moment. We have a comment here from Rachel. I relate to your story in more ways than there's time or space to write. Okay, it's uncanny and a life fiction matchup that resonate with me. Thank you for a lively conversation. Oh, you're welcome, Rachel. Rachel comes here often, so thank you for being here again. Yes, but that is something, just to be able to see that. And I know sometimes people, they may struggle with that or whatever, for whatever reason. But like you said, with Rachel being the type of person, the woman that she was or is in this book, she's gonna have passionate sex.
Yes.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and she's just, and it really is about her journey, because she had lost that part of herself.
Right.
And it really is kind of her coming back to herself as a sexual woman. So that was definitely, I felt like that was very important to depict, and for us to be there for that, for her reclaiming that part of herself.
And it's something, because, back to the marriage, to Matt for a moment, it's like when he chose her at a certain point in his life when they were younger, there were certain things that he liked about her, or the reasons why he wanted to be with her. It's like, I like the fact that you're this sexy woman, but you can't be too sexy publicly.
Right. Yeah. And, Matt is one of those characters that he's easy to dislike, but when I write characters, like, I have empathy towards all the characters I write. I think you can have empathy towards someone and still hold them accountable for the horrible things they do. Matt is one of those people that kind of sabotaged his own happiness because he fell in love with Rachel the way she was, and then turned around and said, okay, well, we have to do this thing. We have to become these people, without any real emotional intelligence or self-awareness to understand that he was turning her into someone who was not the woman he fell in love with.
Right.
And so when he cheats on her, it's he's seeking that feeling because he can't get it from this woman that he's put in this position. So a lot of that doesn't really click for him. And it kind of does near the end, but he never really gets there. And part of that is just being raised in this super privileged kind of household where he wasn't held accountable for that sort of emotional intelligence. So,
right. Which brings up another factor, because of course, and we got a few minutes left, but that does bring up, the fact that Matt and Rachel are an interracial couple.
Yes.
And there are things of race and, attitudes toward race, or maybe a lack of understanding because of those differences, and things like that, without giving too much away, we know he's a politician, and we know that politicians like to show up in places, and having his Black trophy wife with him in certain situations,
right,
seem like he's more down for the cause or whatever. But just because you have a Black wife doesn't necessarily mean that you love Black people.
Yeah. So, I envision him as someone who is like very progressive, was raised in a progressive household. Like, that's how he sees himself. But he is, he's in this ivory tower. So he's kind of removed from it. And, he looks in the mirror and all of his opinions are genuine. Like he absolutely believes what he's saying, but he isn't equipped to understand Rachel's experience. And, when you get married and you're young and you have those separations, like she said, it seems romantic when you're young. And she wasn't in a place where when those things happened, she didn't have the vocabulary to even articulate like how it made her feel. And so, and she loved him. They loved each other. And so there are a lot of things that happened early in their marriage that kind of set a precedent for how those conversations go. And what I really wanted to do was kind of show that interracial marriage, that it's a little less of a romanticized version of marrying someone who is different than you. And he's extremely different than her, her class, race, that sort of thing. And kind of how that, if you're not careful, if you don't caretake a relationship where you have those differences, they will push you apart. And I just feel like their marriage ended because they just were not very good at being married to each other.
Right.
So
yeah, that is true. When you put it in those words, they definitely were not. But it just, yes. Trying to make sure I ask everything that I need to ask. Because I think we've hit pretty much the high notes without giving away too much of the story, so that people will go and still grab a copy because it is really good. It's juicy. The scandal, everything that's happening with all of that and the story, just to be able to see how it plays out and how things wrap up near the end. But I really do appreciate you for writing this story and telling it in the way that you've told it. And, I look forward to seeing more from you. I know. Well, I do have a question about the law piece, because there are people in here that are involved in the legal field, and you have worked in the legal field and still do work in the legal field as well. How important was it for you to show like different types of like lawyers, or how people navigate that when they're dealing with like law within their family and all that sort of stuff? Because those things come up as well.
I feel like that was just me having fun, to be honest. Like, it was a little like the legal part, obviously, for the plot, like how it ultimately resolves itself, that sort of thing. I definitely did a little bit of legal research and made sure. But, I made him a lawyer and I brought some lawyers into it. And particularly like Julia in particular was my fun lawyer. I had a ball writing her and kind of just showing you comparing the different types of approach to being attorneys and stuff. So yeah, that was a little bit of the lawyer side of me having some fun.
Yes. There are definitely different ways that, different approaches that you can have, and having an understanding of that. Now, is there anything that I did not ask that you want to make sure that people are aware of as they go to read the book? I have comment, the title is perfect. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
It is.
I would just say that the book deals with some big themes, but it's also very like a fun kind of soapy book, hopefully a page turner. And there's a happy ending. So a lot of people get nervous when you have, there's some downs, there's some sad parts, there's some funny parts, there's some sexy parts, there's some, hopefully interesting parts. And so I think the whole journey of the book is a little bit of a roller coaster, but you land in a safe place, which is why we love romance, because it's kind of a safe place to experience that roller coaster of emotions. So
definitely so. And just to, like I said, learn some things, to open up some things, to cause you, to look at things differently.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's the core romance, but you're looking at different marriages and, just different types of relationships, all within the book. Friendships, we didn't even really get into the friendships that much. Also with Nathan, he had some really good friends that were like family, chosen family. He wasn't always, close to his family of nurture, So all those things play a good part and make it a well-rounded story. So I know this is your first book, and so you are on a world tour. virtually and otherwise. So are there any things that you have coming up in the near future that people can dive into or tap into that you might be in their cities or other events?
Yeah, so this week I'm traveling to Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to Washington, D.C. I'll be doing an event on Thursday at East City Books. Around, I think it's at 7 o'clock. And so I'll be in conversation with Tracy Livesay. She wrote The Duchess Effect. So I'm super excited about talking to her. And then the following week, I'm flying out to California and I'll be at the Rip Bodice on Tuesday night with some other amazing authors. And then that weekend, I'm going to be at the first Steamy Lit Con, a convention for diverse romance authors, and I'm signing books there. And then after that, I have a virtual event with Women in Children's First in Chicago. So, yeah.
All right. And there's a special on the book right now. I know I posted it in the
Yes.
stories on Instagram, but you want to tell people about the special that's going on
So
right
now, the ebook, the Kindle version of the book, and also the Nook version on Barnes and Noble are both $3.99 right now. And I know that the Amazon special is still through Sunday. So yeah, book is $3.99 right now, which is great. So.
Free, digitized copies of the book, please, take advantage of that and you can buy multiple ones and share them out with others. How about that? Yes. Because that's also beneficial. And of course, there is an audible or an audio version. Because I told you I did a combination of reading and audio.
Yep.
So did you have a chance to help select who did the reading of the book for you, or?
Yeah, they sent me 5.
We might be having a little delay.
Yeah. Can you hear me? All right. They sent me like 5 audiobook narrators, and I got to choose the one that I wanted. And yeah. So.
Well, that's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, okay, Regina, well, I am going to let you go and so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for the Art of Scandal. I look forward to whatever you have coming up next. I know a lot of times you're in the process of promoting this one, but you've already started working on something else, I'm sure.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're having a Regina for being here. If you can, though, hold on for 1 second. Okay, there you are. Okay, slow down for a second, but there you are. So yes, I do look forward to having another chance to talk to you, and please don't hang up yet because I do want to have a chance to say goodnight. So hold on 1 second. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Now it looks like I know it's raining, has been raining in the Atlanta area, so that might be why we're having a little glitch right now, but just to let you know, we will be back next week with the next author, and I'll just show it to you versus trying to put it up on the screen since the screen is acting weird right now. Our next one is going to be Trinity by Zelda Lockhart. So we'll have Zelda Lockhart will be here. There we go. Zelda Lockhart will be here next week with Trinity, and then in 2 weeks we'll be back with One Summer in Savannah by Tara Shelton Harris. So that's who we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. So everybody look forward to seeing those authors. And until then, you all have a great day, a great evening or afternoon, depending on what time you're watching. And we'll see you again here real soon. And don't forget to go out and buy Regina's book. All right, take care. Bye-bye.